Remember when a summer at a fancy Catskills resort turned into the greatest dance floor in movie history? Yeah, that was Dirty Dancing. It's 1987, directed by Emile Ardolino, starring Jennifer Grey as Baby Houseman and Patrick Swayze as Johnny Castle, the resort's bad boy dance instructor who absolutely was not supposed to fall for a guest, but absolutely did anyway. What starts as a coming-of-age summer fling at Kellerman's turns into one of the most rewatched and quoted movies of the decade, and easily the most dangerous to imitate without a chiropractor on standby. But before the romance and that one famous lift, there was a pile of strange behind-the-scenes stories that'll change how you look at the whole thing. And today we're going to count down 15 weird facts about Dirty Dancing. And stick around for number one, because the studio was so convinced that this movie was a disaster that one reaction reportedly was to burn the negative and then collect the insurance. But before we get into it, hit that like button and subscribe if you're new. Fair warning to all, there's a corner, and baby doesn't go there. All right, grab your dancing shoes and those leotards or whatever. We're going to go to the mountains of New York. Number 15, the famous lift that was never rehearsed. The single most imitated move in movie history. The one that people still try in pools and wreck their backs attempting. Jennifer Grey and Patrick Swayze pulled off for real in the final number with no rehearsal at all. Grey said flat out that they never rehearsed the final lift. She gave a hard no to practicing it ahead of time. She was scared, protective of her body, figuring that there was no room for a panic attack, so she'd just do it when the cameras rolled. Never rehearsed it. Never done it since, is how she put it. The only reason that it worked is Swayze. He was classically trained. He was strong. He was used to hoisting dancers over his head. By the end of the shoot, she trusted him completely. Her advice to the legions of people who recreated at weddings? Don't. Unless your partner also happens to be Patrick Swayze, which I kind of doubt now. So the movie that launched 1,000 emergency room visits was a no-net, did-it-on-the-day leap of faith, and they nailed it cold.
Number 14.
The title was worth $1 million at lunch. Now, the most famous title of the decade got invented by accident, over lunch. Screenwriter Eleanor Bergstein was pitching producer Linda Gottlieb a dance story about two sisters at a Catskills resort, and she tossed off a personal aside.
And she said, well, I want to do the story of two sisters in the Catskills, and it will involve Latin dancing.
That she herself used to do dirty dancing, but it had nothing to do with the story. To Bergstein, it was beside the point, but to Gottlieb, it was a lightning bolt. As she told the LA Times in 1987, she dropped her fork and declared the title alone was worth $1 million. And sit with how early this was. There was no finished script, there was no Swayze, no leaping lift, no nobody puts baby in a corner. No soundtrack that would conquer the planet, right? Just two words. Rebellious enough to make a teenager curious, and a parent deeply suspicious, which in the mid-'80s was basically a marketing department's dream come true. The whole identity of the movie was sitting in a phrase that Bergstein nearly let float right past. Gottlieb was right, by the way. 40 years later, and it's one of the most recognizable movie titles ever slapped on a poster. Turns out a drop fork has sharper instincts than a room full of studio execs. Number 13, Billy Zane screen tested for Johnny. Patrick Swayze almost wasn't Johnny Castle. Before the role turned into one of the defining performances of the decade, a whole parade of future stars cycled through auditions, including a 20-year-old Billy Zane, years before he would menace anyone aboard the Titanic. Zane made it all the way to a final screen test opposite Jennifer Grey, and on the surface, he fit. The early version of Johnny was written as a darker, Italian tough guy, which was right in Zane's lane. Then came the part of the job that, the whole movie is about, the dancing. And screenwriter Eleanor Bergstein's review was pretty merciless. Zane, she said, danced like someone who learned to dance wonderfully for his bar mitzvah. Ouch. And he wasn't the only near miss circling this thing. Val Kilmer and Benicio del Toro were both considered for Johnny. Del Toro years before anyone could pronounce his name, and the shortlist for Baby, well, that was Winona Ryder, Sarah Jessica Parker, and Sharon Stone before Grey landed it. I mean, a whole alternate universe version of this movie is sitting right there. But then Swayze walked in, and the search just kind of stopped. Bergstein said that it was always him, and it was only him. Not a finalist, not a frontrunner, just the guy. They even rewrote Johnny's heritage from Italian to Irish to fit him. Now, once you've watched Swayze cross that room for the final dance, the bar mitzvah kid, he never stood a chance. Number 12, She's Like the Wind was a reject from another movie. One of the biggest songs tied to Dirty Dancing almost never landed in the movie at all. And by the time that it did, it had already been thrown out of 2 other films. Patrick Swayze co-wrote She's Like the Wind back in 1984 with songwriter Stacy Wittlitz, originally for a completely different movie, Grandview, USA, which Swayze happened to be starring in. Now, he was sure that it belonged on the soundtrack, but the producers weren't. So the song got rejected and then shoved into a drawer. Now, most people would have let it die there, but not Swayze. A couple years later, he dusted off the demo and then pitched it again for a hockey movie called Youngblood, starring Rob Lowe. And somehow it got rejected again. Lowe has since laughed about it, recalling how Swayze kept hauling that demo around like a guy clutching a winning lottery ticket that nobody else could read yet. Then, Dirty Dancing came along. During production, Swayze played the song for producer Linda Gottlieb and director Emile Ardolino. And this was the time it clicked instantly. They recorded it in late 1986, with Wendy Frazier back on the haunting female vocals, the same voice from the original demo years earlier. Dirty Dancing is set in 1963, but She's Like the Wind is pure mid-80s soft rock. The synths, the swelling vocals, the full power bad melodrama. Nobody cared. It exploded on radio. It climbed to number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100. It topped the adult contemporary chart and became one of the defining movie ballads of the decade, which means one of the most unforgettable songs of the 80s was, well, technically Hollywood's twice rejected Leftovers. Number 11, the soundtrack became one of the best-selling albums ever. Now, the movie made Dirty Dancing famous, but the soundtrack made it inescapable. For a couple of years there, this album was everywhere, blasting out of car stereos, jammed into Walkmans, stacked by the register in every department store, playing in roughly every teenager's bedroom in America. And for a tie-in record nobody had high hopes for, the numbers got absurd pretty quickly. It spent a ridiculous 18 weeks parked at number 1 on the Billboard 200 and became one of the best-selling soundtracks in movie history. In the US alone, it went diamond, 14 times platinum. Worldwide, the estimates get fuzzy, but enormous. North of 30 million copies, with some reports running much higher. Soundtrack tie-ins didn't do this. This one rewrote the record books, and it wasn't carried by a single song. I've Had the Time of My Life became a juggernaut and won the Academy Award for Best Original Song. Hungry Eyes put Eric Carmen back on the radio in a big way, and the album was so deep that The Leftovers, a second record, More Dirty Dancing, went multi-platinum too. A movie set in 1963 somehow produced one of the defining soundtracks of 1987. And for a whole generation, a few bars of any of it still drags you straight back to slow dances, summer crushes, and questionable choices on the dance floor. Number 10, nobody wanted to sing the theme. It sounded like a bad porno. It's almost impossible to picture Dirty Dancing without, I've had the time of my life, right? Yeah, and yet it still has become one of the most iconic movie songs of the entire decade. But nobody wanted to sing the thing. A whole lineup of major artists got the call and passed. Donna Summer reportedly turned it down specifically because she couldn't get past the title Dirty Dancing. And Lionel Richie, Daryl Hall, and Kim Carnes all said no right behind her. Plenty of people in the music world figured that this little dance movie was going nowhere and passed. Even Bill Medley, the deep-voiced Righteous brother who eventually recorded the song, wanted nothing to do with it at first. When the producers came calling, his honest reaction was, in his words, geez, that sounds like a bad porno movie. Not exactly a ringing endorsement. It also didn't help that his wife was about to have a baby, and he wasn't dying to fly out and cut some throwaway duet. But then Jennifer Warnes came aboard. The session got moved to LA, and the idea of singing it with her is what finally won Medley over. Good thing, too. The song detonated. It shot to number 1, it won an Oscar, and welded itself permanently to one of the most famous dance scenes ever put on film. So one of the biggest songs of the entire decade nearly died on the vine because Hollywood thought Dirty Dancing sounded like something hidden behind a beaded curtain at a sketchy video store. Number 9, they lost their sponsor over an abortion subplot. Now, one of the biggest fights behind the scenes on Dirty Dancing had nothing to do with the dancing. It was about the abortion storyline. It's easy to forget how risky that subject was for a mainstream movie in the 1980s, especially one being sold to teens. But Penny's illegal back alley abortion made a lot of people very nervous, including the people with the marketing money. A potential sponsor, an acne cream brand that wanted its product on every Dirty Dancing poster, looked like a marketing dream come true, but then they actually saw what was in the film. The acne cream brand caught the abortion plot and then bailed, and the studio leaned on Eleanor Bergstein to cut it entirely. But she wouldn't, for a deliberate reason. She'd built the whole movie around that storyline on purpose. As Bergstein put it, the abortion stayed in, and the acne cream went out. Pull that thread and the movie unravels, which is exactly why she made it impossible to pull. It's a big part of why Dirty Dancing hit harder than most summer romance movies had any right to. Underneath the music and the lake practice and the leather jacket was a story actually dealing with class and consequences. And that's a lot of why it stuck with people. Number 8, the MPAA rated it R twice before it finally got PG-13. You'd figure a movie about summer romance and dancing at a resort would sail to an easy PG-13, but think again. When Dirty Dancing first went to the MPAA, it didn't come back PG or even PG-13. It came back R, and then they fixed things. They resubmitted, and it came back R again. And the bizarre part is why. According to producer Linda Gottlieb, the problem wasn't nudity or explicit content in the usual sense. By then, they'd already pulled the nudity out. The problem was the dancing itself. As she told the LA Times in 1987, the really erotic sequences are the dance sequences. The heat coming off Swayze and Gray charged enough that the ratings board kept flinching. So the filmmakers went back a third time, and that round finally landed the PG-13 that they've been chasing. And that mattered more than it sounds. Getting to PG-13 is what put it in front of exactly the crowd that would end up watching it on repeat for the next 40 years. Hey, quick pause. Be honest, how many times have you watched this movie and still tried the lift with someone in a pool? No judgment, maybe some concern, maybe a pulled back, but no judgment. And if you're enjoying this countdown, smash that like button and tell us a fact that surprised you the most so far. All right, let's get back to Kellerman's. Number 7, Swayze had a literal no dancing rule and took it anyway. Before Patrick Swayze became one of the most iconic dancers in movie history, really, he'd already made up his mind about something. He was done dancing. It traced back to a brutal high school football injury that wrecked his left knee, the same knee that would go on to take an absolute beating across his career. After that, Swayze didn't ease off dancing, he ran from it. At one point, he actually put no dancing right on his acting resume. Not as a bid, but an actual boundary. He was trying to dodge the teen idol machine, sidestep the typecasting, and stay out of the kind of physically punishing dance rules that could finish off a knee that was already held together with hope. He and his wife, Lisa Niemi, even ran a carpentry business, Nepotism Inc., specifically so they could stay choosy about work instead of taking just whatever Hollywood handed them. And for a while, it worked. He was building a name as a serious actor, not just a dancer. But then Dirty Dancing showed up, a role built start to finish around movement, choreography, and physical chemistry. It was exactly the kind of job that he'd sworn off, and he said yes anyway. The bill came due fast. The choreography was relentless, but the worst of it came from the big set pieces, especially the log balancing sequence. All of that unstable weight-bearing work that hammered the knee over and over, well, that old injury flared up hard during production. And at one point, the swelling got bad enough that he had to go to the hospital to have fluid drained just to keep shooting. He later said that the knee was bone to bone. Most of the cartilage was all gone. But he kept going anyway, because the role that he'd sworn off turned out to be the one that redefined his entire career, and turned the guy who quit dancing into the face of one of the most famous dance movies ever made. Number 6, the giggling scene was real and unscripted. Now, one of the most charming moments in Dirty Dancing wasn't in the script at all. It happened during a rehearsal scene. Johnny walking Baby through the basic steps, building her rhythm and timing. The problem was that Jennifer Grey kept breaking, not acting, not performing, just laughing. Grey was genuinely ticklish, and every time Swayze's hand grazed her arm, she'd lose it. They'd reset, go again, and she'd crack up again and again and again. And Swayze's exasperation was just as real. A tired actor at 4 a.m. in a freezing rehearsal space trying to land one clean take while his partner came apart laughing. You can read all of it on his face. Patience, annoyance, and a flicker of, "Can we please finish this?" As Ortega put it later, the look was completely real. Nobody directed that. Then the filmmakers watched the footage and saw the good stuff. A moment where Baby and Johnny stopped looking like characters and started looking like two people figuring each other out. So they kept it in. A blown take became one of the warmest glimpses of their connection in the entire movie. Number 5, Jennifer Grey didn't want him until the screen test apology. Before Dirty Dancing was ever a love story on screen, there was a problem that nearly killed it. Jennifer Grey didn't want Patrick Swayze anywhere near the film. And it wasn't a vague feeling. The two of them worked together a couple of years earlier on 1984's Red Dawn, and Grey came away exhausted by him. The pranks, the big macho energy, the way that he acted like the boss of everybody. So when his name came up for Johnny Castle, her answer was pretty instant. Anybody but him. But the screen test put them in the room together anyway, so Swayze pulled her aside, away from the cameras, and did something that she wasn't expecting. He apologized. Through tears, he told her, "I love you, and I am so sorry." And that he knew that she didn't want him in the film. Grey, to her credit, was skeptical. Her read was that he was working her. But then they started dancing, and the tension flipped into something entirely else. As Grey put it, "He takes me in his arms, and I was like, oh boy, I'm done." That was the moment that Johnny and Baby stopped being a casting question and started becoming inevitable. Number 4, the lake scene, spray-painted leaves and freezing water. The lake material was shot in the fall of 1986, split between Mountain Lake, Virginia, which doubled as Kellerman's, and Lake Lure, North Carolina, and the season was working against them. Instead of a sun-soaked summer resort, the crew was staring at cold air, colder water, and trees full of leaves that had very much gotten the memo that summer was over. So they did the desperate, gloriously low-tech thing. They spray-painted the turning leaves green, faking peak summer at Kellerman's, one coat of paint at a time. Then you had the water, which was brutally cold. By one account, down to around 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Brrr, that's cold enough to make even a quick dip turn punishing. Gray didn't sugarcoat it. She called the water horrifically cold and admitted that she might not have gone through with it if she hadn't been, in her words, young and hungry. Swayze said much the same, that the water was cold enough to flirt with actual hypothermia, and the misery reportedly shaped how the scene was even shot. The story goes that the actors' lips kept turning blue between takes, which made tight close-ups a problem. It's hard to sell a dreamy summer romance when everyone's about the color of a popsicle. So what plays as a soft golden lakeside memory was really two people trying not to freeze while pretending it was July in North Carolina. Somehow the strain only makes the moment land harder. Number 3, the first film to sell 1 million copies on home video. The box office was respectable enough, about $64 million at home and roughly $214 million worldwide, which is already a lot for a film that nobody treated like a blockbuster. But the wild part happened on home video. When the tape hit shelves in 1988, people did something that they almost never did back then. They bought it instead of renting it. At a time when the home video business ran almost entirely on rentals, that was nearly unheard of, and they bought it in numbers that nobody had seen. It became the first film ever to sell more than 1 million copies on video. That's the part that turned a summer romance sleeper into a permanent fixture. The movie stopped being something that caught you once in a theater and became something that lived in the house, replayed at sleepovers, worn down to static by teenagers, and kept on permanent rotation by cable. Every rewatch made it feel bigger than a small summer romance had any right to. In a lot of ways, Dirty Dancing was one of the original rewatch movies. Not a film that you saw, it was a film you owned. Number 2, Swayze hated "Nobody puts baby in a corner." It's one of the most quoted lines in movie history, and Patrick Swayze couldn't stand it. Of all the heavy lifting that Dirty Dancing asked of him, the thing that he wrestled with the most was that single line. In his memoir, he didn't mince words about it. There was a lot of rewriting on that final scene, but the line that he hated the most survived, and he could barely make himself say it, because to his ear, it sounded just hopelessly corny. And look, you can see his point. It doesn't sound like something a grounded, tough dance instructor would actually say. It sounds like a line straining to become iconic, but that's the funny thing about movies. Sometimes the corny line is the one that actually sticks. He said it, the scene stayed in, and when he finally watched the finished film, even he had to admit it landed. So a line that he never believed in became one of the most repeated moments in film history, recognized instantly, and known even by people who couldn't tell you a single other thing about the movie. And there's a quieter coda. Years later, while facing pancreatic cancer, Swayze reached for the line one more time, turning it on himself with characteristic grit as "Nobody puts Patrick's pancreas in a corner." Even off-screen, he found a way to make the line that he never liked mean something. Number 1, the studio wanted to burn the negative and collect the insurance. Before Dirty Dancing was a cultural phenomenon, it was a movie that nobody in Hollywood wanted. Every major studio passed, 43 rejections in total, until a little home video outfit called Vestron took it on as the first feature that they'd ever made, on a budget of about $5 million and roughly zero confidence. The plan was to drop it in theaters for a weekend and then ship it off to the VHS shelves. But then the rough cut came together, and even Vestron panicked. Nobody on the team liked it. The expectation wasn't "modest hit," it was "how bad is this going to be?" And the most infamous reaction came out of a screening tied to producer Alan Russo. According to Vestron executive Mitchell Cannold, Russo's verdict was as blunt as it gets: burn the negative, collect the insurance. Let that sink in. Not recut it, not dump it to video, but rather torch it for the insurance money. Some of them figured the most valuable thing about the film was the policy covering the stock. They released it anyway, and the audience saw something that the execs never did. It didn't open huge, but it grew. Word of mouth spread, people went back for seconds and thirds, and the movie that nobody at the studio believed in kept building week after week until it had pulled in roughly $214 million worldwide. The film they wanted to burn for the insurance turned into one of the most enduring hits of the next 4 decades. Turns out the only thing worth torching was their judgment. And there you have it, everyone. 15 weird facts about Dirty Dancing. casting near misses, rejected songs, a battered knee, and a studio that had zero faith in this thing. Honestly, it's a small miracle that it ever reached theaters, let alone turn into a pop culture heavyweight that's still going 4 decades later. But now we want to hear from you. What fact surprised you the most? Well, drop it in the comments, hit that like button, and if you enjoyed this ride, subscribe for more deep dives into the movies and shows that we grew up on. Until next time, it's a feeling, it's a heartbeat, and this is Remember When.